Karoline Leavitt stepped onto the Fox News stage. Young and untested, Robert De Niro smirked, calling her a Gen Z puppet before she could speak. The audience laughed, expecting her to fold. But that quiet woman from a New Hampshire diner wasn't just there to listen. She was ready to turn the tables. So who was really out of their depth? Before we dive into the story, please like, share this video, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us reach 1,000 subscribers and keeps us telling stories that matter. Thank you. Karoline Leavitt walked into the Fox News New York studio, her low heels tapping softly against the polished wood floor. The stage lights glared down, hot and unforgiving, as she smoothed her navy blazer. At 27, she was the youngest White House press secretary ever. A fact the host, Laura Ingraham, announced with a practiced smile. The audience, a mix of suited professionals and curious locals, murmured. Some leaned forward, skeptical. Others whispered about her age. Karoline caught a few words too young. Trump's pick and kept her chin high, her expression steady. She took her seat across from Robert De Niro, the Hollywood legend whose presence filled the room like a storm cloud. He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, a faint smirk playing on his lips. His dark suit and silver hair gave him an air of untouchable authority. Laura began the introductions, her voice crisp, but De Niro cut in before she could finish. "This is who they send," he said, his tone dripping with disdain. "A Gen Z puppet, reading Trump's script." The audience gasped, a few chuckling nervously. He leaned forward, pointing a finger. "What's that necklace? Your Catholic prop to look wholesome." Karoline's jaw tightened, her fingers brushing the gold cross at her neck, a gift from her mother back in New Hampshire. She didn't flinch, though her pulse quickened. The camera zoomed in, catching the glint of the necklace under the lights. She folded her hands on the table, her nails neat but unpolished, a contrast to De Niro's manicured confidence. The audience waited, expecting her to crumble. Instead, she met his gaze, her brown eyes unwavering, a stagehand in the shadows. A young woman with a clipboard caught Karoline's glance and nodded slightly, a small gesture of solidarity no one else noticed. Laura tried to steer back, her smile tight. "Let's talk policy," she said, but De Niro waved her off. "Policy, she's here to parrot talking points. No experience, no weight." The crowd stirred, some nodding along, others shifting uncomfortably. Karoline adjusted the stack of notes in front of her, the edges worn from hours of preparation. She didn't speak, didn't snap back. Her silence hung heavy, louder than any retort. A producer in the control room muttered, "She's got to push back soon, or she's done." The air felt thick, the studio a pressure cooker. Karoline's mind flicked to her parents' diner, where she'd learned to handle loudmouths with calm. She wasn't here to shout, she was here to stand her ground. De Niro leaned back, his smirk widening, mistaking her quiet for defeat. The camera panned between them, his confidence stark against her composure. Laura glanced at Karoline, her eyebrow raised, urging a response. The audience held its breath, sensing a moment teetering on the edge. Karoline's fingers tapped her notes once, then stilled. She leaned forward slightly, her voice soft but clear, cutting through the tension like a blade. "Mr. De Niro, may I ask you a question?" The words were simple, polite, but they landed like a spark in dry grass. De Niro's smirk faltered. Just for a second, the audience leaned in, curious. Laura's eyes widened, a flicker of anticipation crossing her face. The stagehand in the shadows gripped her clipboard tighter, a faint smile forming. Something was coming, and no one, not even De Niro, was ready for it. Karoline Leavitt stood alone in a dim hallway backstage at the Fox News studio, the distant hum of the audience filtering through the walls. Her fingers gripped her phone, the screen glowing with a photo of her parents' diner in New Hampshire, a small, weathered building with a neon sign that flickered at night. She swiped to another image, herself at 16, pouring coffee for truckers. Her apron stained, but her smile bright. The memory steadied her. She wasn't the Gen Z puppet De Niro had sneered at. She was the girl who'd grown up wiping tables and listening to locals argue politics over pie. Her phone buzzed. A text from her mom. "Stay strong. Honey, we're watching." Karoline's throat tightened, but she didn't let herself linger. She slipped the phone into her pocket, her fingers brushing a worn prayer card, its edges soft from years of handling. The card, a gift from her grandmother, held a simple verse about courage. She didn't need to read it. The words lived in her. "I didn't come here to be loud," she thought, "just to be true." Through a monitor nearby, De Niro's voice boomed, sharp and mocking. "She's Trump's cheerleader, nothing more." The words stung, but Karoline's hands only trembled for a moment. She closed her eyes, picturing her dad at the diner, his voice calm but firm. "Truth doesn't need volume, Karoline. It just needs you." She opened her eyes, her resolve hardening. The studio's glare, the audience's skepticism, De Niro's disdain, none of it could erase where she came from or why she was here. She walked back toward the stage, her heels clicking with purpose. The stagehand from earlier, a young woman named Jenny with a clipboard, caught her eye and mouthed, "You've got this." Karoline nodded, a small connection in the chaos. As she reached the stage door, she overheard two producers talking. "She's too quiet," one said. "De Niro's eating her alive." The other shrugged. "Give her 5 minutes. She's done." Karoline's jaw set. They didn't know her, just like De Niro didn't. She stepped back into the studio, the lights hitting her like a spotlight. The audience was restless, some fanning themselves with programs, others whispering about De Niro's latest jab. Laura Ingram sat at the host's desk, her expression curious but guarded, as if sizing Karoline up. De Niro leaned back in his chair, his arms crossed, a king on his throne. He caught Karoline's entrance and smirked, his eyes saying she was already beaten. The audience followed his lead, their murmurs growing sharper, more dismissive. Karoline took her seat, her movements deliberate. She adjusted her blazer, her gold cross necklace catching the light. The camera lingered on her, the director sensing a shift. Laura leaned forward, her voice smooth. "Karoline, Robert's made some strong points. Care to respond?" The question was a challenge, but Karoline didn't rush. She glanced at her notes, the pages filled with neat handwriting from nights spent researching De Niro's interviews, Trump's policies, and her own story. She wasn't here to play his game. She was here to change it. The audience leaned in, some expecting her to falter, others hoping for a spark. De Niro tapped his fingers on the table, impatient. Karoline's hands were steady now, her earlier tremble gone. She thought of the diner again, of the truckers who tipped her with crumpled bills, of her mom's text, of the prayer card in her pocket. This wasn't just about her. It was for them, for the people she'd promised to represent. She slipped the prayer card into her blazer, her fingers lingering on its familiar texture. Her lips moved faintly, a whisper no one heard. "This is for them." She looked up, her eyes locking on Laura. Then De Niro. The studio felt smaller, the noise fading. She wasn't the kid they thought she was. Her next move, whatever it was, would carry the weight of her roots, her faith, her fight. The chapter closed with her hand resting on her notes, a faint smile tugging at her lips, as she said softly, "Let's talk about the truth. Shall we promise that her silence was over, and something bigger was coming?" Karoline Leavitt sat steady on the Fox News stage, her hands resting lightly on her notes as the audience's murmurs filled the air. Robert De Niro's sharp jabs still echoed his Gen Z puppet line, his mockery of her faith. The studio lights felt hotter now, the crowd restless, some fanning themselves with programs, others whispering bets on how long she'd last. Laura Ingraham leaned forward, her voice smooth but expectant. "Karoline." Roberts laid out his case. "Your response." The question hung like a challenge, the audience's eyes darting between the young press secretary and the Hollywood titan. Karoline didn't rush. She adjusted her blazer, the gold cross necklace at her throat catching a glint of light, a quiet reminder of her resolve. Instead of firing back, she looked at Laura, her tone even. "Can we play a clip? Please." The request was simple, almost polite, but it shifted the room's energy. De Niro's smirk froze, his fingers pausing mid-tap on the table. Laura raised an eyebrow, intrigued, and nodded to the control booth. The audience stirred, curious but unsure. As the massive studio screen flickered to life, the clip rolled a 2016 interview. De Niro in a crisp suit, his voice warm as he praised Obama's unifying leadership and grounded vision. The crowd gasped softly, some leaning forward, others glancing at De Niro. His face tightened, the confident glint in his eyes dimming. The clip ended, and silence blanketed the studio for a beat. Karoline leaned into the microphone, her voice calm but sharp, cutting through the tension. "Mr. De Niro, you called unity a sham tonight. Which version of you is real?" The question landed like a dart, precise and unexpected. The audience erupted, some cheered, others booed. The room splitting down the middle. Laura's eyes widened, a flicker of admiration crossing her face. De Niro blinked, caught off guard, his hands clenching briefly before he forced a laugh. "Kids and their tricks," he said, waving a hand dismissively. "You think a YouTube clip changes anything?" His tone was sharp, but his eyes darted to the audience, searching for support. The crowd's reaction was mixed, some nodding with him, others murmuring in Karoline's favor. In the shadows, a stagehand named Jenny, the same one who'd nodded to Karoline earlier, whispered to a producer, "She's got him." The producer, a gray-haired man in a headset, raised an eyebrow but didn't respond. Karoline's necklace glinted again as she shifted in her seat, her face composed but her pulse quickening. She'd taken a risk, and she knew it. De Niro wasn't just a celebrity, he was a cultural giant, and she'd called his bluff on live TV. The camera zoomed in, catching the faint flush on De Niro's cheeks, the way his fingers tapped faster now. Laura seized the moment, her voice cutting in. "That's a fair question. Robert, care to clarify?" Her tone was neutral, but her eyes flicked to Karoline, a hint of anticipation there. De Niro leaned forward, his jaw tight. "I've been in this game longer than she's been alive," he said, pointing at Karoline without looking at her. "I don't need to explain myself to a press secretary." The audience stirred again, some clapping for his bravado, but others hesitated, sensing a crack in his armor. Karoline didn't flinch. She jotted a quick note, her pen moving steadily, as if De Niro's words were just noise. Her calm unnerved the room. A few audience members exchanged glances, their skepticism about her softening. On the sidelines, Jenny the stagehand pulled out her phone, her fingers flying as she posted a snippet of the clip to X. The post was simple. Karoline Leavitt just called out De Niro. Watch this. Within seconds, likes and retweets began to tick up, the first ripples of a social media wave. Karoline's phone, tucked in her blazer, vibrated faintly. She ignored it, her focus on the stage, but the vibration came again. Insistent, she risked a glance during a brief pause as Laura transitioned to a commercial break. The screen showed a notification, a tweet from an ex-user with thousands of followers. Who is this girl? The words were plain, but they carried weight. A spark that could ignite something bigger. Karoline's lips pressed together. Not quite a smile. She slipped the phone back into her pocket, her fingers brushing the prayer card from her grandmother. The studio buzzed as the break ended, the audience settling back in. De Niro adjusted his tie, his movements sharp, like a boxer prepping for the next round. Laura looked between them, her smile calculated. We're back, and things are heating up, she said, her voice carrying a hint of excitement. Karoline leaned back in her chair, her face unreadable, her notes untouched now. She'd fired her first shot, and the room felt different, charged, expectant. De Niro's eyes met hers, narrower now, as if seeing her for the first time. Whatever came next. Karoline was ready. Karoline Leavitt sat under the searing studio lights, the Fox News stage now a battleground. Her video clip exposing De Niro's hypocrisy had landed, but the air grew thicker as Robert De Niro leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. He'd shaken off his earlier stumble, his voice sharp and deliberate. You're dodging the real issues, kid, he said, his tone slicing through the room. What's a diner waitress from New Hampshire doing playing press secretary? The audience laughed, a harsh ripple that stung. Some shifted in their seats, their faces uneasy, but others clapped, egging him on. Karoline's cheeks flushed, her fingers tightening around the edge of her notes. She caught her reflection in a monitor, her gold cross necklace glinting, a tether to her roots. Backstage, in a brief moment during a commercial break, she'd slipped into a quiet corner, gripping her grandmother's prayer card. The verse about courage felt distant now, her faith tested by De Niro's relentless attacks. She'd returned to the stage, but his words echoed waitress, puppet. The audience's laughter lingered, a weight pressing on her chest. Laura Ingraham, seated between them, raised a hand to mediate. Let's keep this focused, she said, her voice calm but firm. Robert, you've made your point. Karoline, care to address his critique? Her tone was neutral, but her eyes flicked to Karoline, expectant. De Niro didn't wait. She's complicit in Trump's chaos, he said, pointing at her. No experience, just a loyalist reading scripts. The crowd stirred, some nodding, others murmuring. A man in a suit near the front shook his head, skeptical of Karoline's silence. Karoline's phone buzzed in her blazer, a faint distraction. She ignored it, but the vibrations persisted, each one a reminder of the world beyond the stage. Social media was erupting. Posts with Gen Z puppet were flooding her notifications, twisting her video clip into a cheap stunt. She caught a glimpse of one post during a quick glance. Leavitt's out of her league. De Niro's eating her lunch, her stomach twisted, but she pushed it down. She wasn't here to scroll X. She was here to fight. Backstage, a producer named Tom, a wiry man with glasses, pulled her aside during the break. Keep it civil. Karoline, he said, his voice low. You're coming off aggressive. You'll look desperate. His warning rattled her. She nodded, but her confidence wavered as she returned to her seat. Her phone buzzed again, a text from a colleague in D.C. They're tearing you apart online. Stay cool. The words hit like a punch. The studio felt smaller, the audience's eyes sharper, De Niro's presence larger. Laura's voice cut through the noise. Karoline, Robert's questioned your role in the administration. How do you defend your loyalty to Trump? The question was a tightrope, and Karoline felt the weight of every gaze. Laura's, De Niro's, the audience's. De Niro leaned back, his arms crossed, a faint smirk returning. He thought he'd won this round, his posture saying she'd crack under pressure. The camera zoomed in, catching the sweat beading on her forehead, the slight tremor in her hands. Karoline straightened, her shoulders squaring. She thought of her parents' diner, of the truckers who'd trusted her with their stories, of her mom's text, "Stay strong." She wasn't just fighting for herself, she was fighting for them, for the people De Niro's world ignored. Her fingers brushed her notes, but she didn't need them. She looked at De Niro, her brown eyes locking onto his. The room seemed to quiet, the audience holding its breath. Her voice, when it came, was quiet but steady, each word deliberate. "You don't know me, Mr. De Niro," she said, pausing just long enough for the words to sink in. "But you're about to—" The promise hung in the air, a defiant spark that shifted the room's energy. De Niro's smirk faltered, his fingers twitching on the table. Laura's lips twitched, a hint of a smile. The audience leaned forward, some whispering, others nodding. Jenny, the stagehand, watched from the sidelines, her phone still open to X, where posts about Karoline were gaining traction. Karoline leaned back, her face calm but her pulse racing. She'd drawn a line, and there was no going back. De Niro's eyes narrowed, his jaw tightening as he adjusted his tie. He opened his mouth to respond, but Laura cut in, her voice bright. "We'll pick this up after the break." The studio lights dimmed slightly, and the audience buzzed, their murmurs a mix of excitement and disbelief. Karoline's phone vibrated again, but she didn't check it. She knew what was coming, a storm, and she was ready to face it. Karoline Leavitt stepped back onto the Fox News stage, the bright lights casting long shadows behind her. The audience was no longer a unified front. Some clapped as she took her seat. Others crossed their arms, still siding with Robert De Niro. Her quiet promise, "You don't know me, Mr. De Niro, but you're about to," still hung in the air, a challenge that had shifted the room's pulse. Laura Ingram, sensing the tension, adjusted her notes and leaned forward, her smile calculated. "Karoline, let's take a step back," she said. "Tell us about you. Where does this fight come from?" Karoline paused, her fingers brushing the gold cross necklace at her throat. She didn't want to boast, that wasn't her way. She looked out at the audience, their faces a mix of curiosity and doubt, and spoke plainly. "I grew up in New Hampshire, working in my parents' diner," she said, her voice steady. "I served coffee to truckers, farmers, folks who taught me more about America than any penthouse could." The camera caught a few audience members nodding, their expressions softening. A woman in a red sweater clutched her program, her eyes fixed on Karoline. De Niro rolled his eyes, a sharp gesture that didn't go unnoticed. He shifted in his chair, his fingers drumming on the table. "Nice story," he said, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "But diners don't run the White House." A few audience members chuckled, but others frowned, their loyalty wavering. Karoline didn't flinch. She thought of the diner's worn counter, the smell of bacon and coffee, the truckers who tipped her with crumpled bills. That was her America, not De Niro's. Laura's eyes flicked to De Niro, then back to Karoline. "That's a grounded perspective," she said, her voice encouraging. "But Robert's questioning your qualifications. How do you answer that?" Before Karoline could respond, a producer named Tom hurried to Laura's side, his glasses glinting under the lights. He whispered something, pointing to a monitor. Laura's eyebrows shot up, and she nodded. "Hold that thought," she said, turning to the audience. "We've got a reaction coming in." The studio screen lit up, displaying a live X-post from a prominent conservative commentator, Jack Harlan, with over 1 million followers. The post read, "Karoline Leavitt's got grit." She dug up De Niro's own words to call him out. "That's not luck, that's work," the crowd murmured, some pulling out their phones to check X. The post included a screenshot of Karoline's research notes, shared by a source close to her team, showing hours spent studying De Niro's interviews and Trump's policies. The revelation hit like a spark, igniting whispers across the room. Karoline's face remained calm, but her pulse quickened. She hadn't expected her prep to go public. De Niro's jaw tightened, his fingers stopping their restless tapping. He leaned forward, his voice low but sharp. "So you're a researcher now doesn't make you qualified." His defensiveness was clear, his eyes darting to the screen, then back to Karoline. The audience sensed a shift, their murmurs growing louder. A man in the back row shook his head, muttering, "He's rattled." Laura seized the moment, her voice bright. "Robert, it sounds like Karoline's done her homework." Thoughts De Niro scoffed, adjusting his tie. "Homework doesn't mean wisdom," he said, but his words lacked their earlier bite. The camera caught the sweat on his brow, the slight tremor in his hand. Karoline sat still, her necklace catching the light again, a quiet symbol of her steadfastness. She didn't need to speak. The room was turning in her favor. Jenny, the stagehand who'd posted Karoline's clip earlier, watched from the sidelines, her phone buzzing with notifications. Her post about the video clip was now trending, with thousands of retweets. She caught Karoline's eye and gave a small nod, a silent cheer. Karoline nodded back, a fleeting connection that grounded her. The audience was no longer just watching. They were choosing sides, their faces a mix of admiration and skepticism. Laura kept the pressure on. "Karoline, Jack Harlan's calling you a strategist. Is that how you see yourself?" Karoline smiled faintly, her first real smile of the night. "I see myself as someone who shows up," she said. "I don't need a penthouse to know what's true." The audience clapped. Louder now, some standing. De Niro's smirk was gone, replaced by a tight-lipped frown. He opened his mouth to respond, but Laura cut to a commercial break, her voice smooth. "We'll be right back." As the lights dimmed, Karoline's phone buzzed again. She glanced at it, expecting another X notification. Instead, it was a direct message from Jack Harlan himself. "Meet me after. You're not done yet." The words were brief but heavy, a hint of something bigger on the horizon. Karoline slipped the phone back into her blazer, her fingers brushing her prayer card. She looked out at the audience, their faces now a mix of respect and curiosity. De Niro adjusted his chair, his movements stiff. The stage felt different now, the balance tipping. Karoline wasn't just a kid anymore. Karoline Leavitt felt the Fox News studio pulse with raw energy as she sat across from Robert De Niro. The audience's divided cheers and boos filling the air. Her last words, "You don't know me, but you're about to," had ignited the room. And De Niro wasn't backing down. He leaned forward, his face hard, his voice cutting like a blade. "You sold out, Karoline," he said, jabbing a finger. "You're not fighting for America, you're propping up Trump's circus." The accusation landed heavy, and the crowd erupted, some clapping for De Niro, others shouting in protest. Laura Ingraham raised a hand, her voice sharp. "Let's hear from Karoline," she said. Her eyes locked on the young press secretary. The camera zoomed in, catching the glint of Karoline's gold cross necklace, a steady anchor amid the chaos. She didn't flinch, though her fingers tightened briefly on her notes. She thought of Jack Harlan's message. "You're not done yet," in the diner back home, where her parents were watching. This was her moment, but the stakes were higher than ever. Karoline pivoted, her voice clear and deliberate. "You lecture about unity from a $20 million mansion, Mr. De Niro," she said, pausing to let the words sink in. "I fight for people who can't afford your movie tickets." The audience exploded, half cheered wildly, half booed, the room splitting like a fault line. A woman in the front row stood, clapping, while a man nearby shook his head, muttering. De Niro's face reddened, his hands clenching on the table. He opened his mouth to retort, But Karoline wasn't finished. Backstage, during a quick break, the producer Tom had pulled her aside, his glasses fogging with stress. "Keep it safe, Karoline," he'd warned, his voice low. "Go too hard, and you'll be labeled a firebrand. Your career's on the line." His words echoed now, a caution she couldn't ignore. She caught sight of Jenny, the stagehand who'd nodded to her in the first chapter. Standing near the stage, Jenny gave a quick thumbs up, her face alight with encouragement. The small gesture steadied Karoline, but the choice was hers alone. Play it safe to protect her future or go all in. Risking everything, she chose to fight. Karoline reached for a stat sheet tucked in her notes, her movements precise. "Let's talk facts," she said, her voice rising just enough to command the room. Under Trump, job growth hit 3 million in 2 years. Border apprehensions dropped 30%. What's your plan, Mr. De Niro? More speeches from Manhattan. The audience roared, the cheers drowning out the boos now. Laura's lips twitched, a hint of a smile. De Niro's face darkened, his fingers tapping furiously. "That's cherry-picking," he snapped, interrupting. But Laura cut him off, her voice firm. "Let her finish, Robert." Karoline pressed on, her stats flowing like a rehearsed rhythm, each number a blow to De Niro's vague critiques. The camera caught his discomfort sweat beading on his forehead, his tie slightly askew. The audience leaned forward, sensing blood in the water. On X, posts with Leavitt beats De Niro surged, Jenny's clip of Karoline's video play now trending with thousands of shares. A man in the audience pulled out his phone, recording Karoline's words, his face lit with excitement. De Niro tried to regain control, his voice loud but unsteady. "You're twisting numbers to dodge the chaos," he said. But the audience wasn't fully with him anymore. Karoline didn't waver. She set her stat sheet down, her eyes locking onto De Niro's. The room seemed to shrink, the noise fading for a moment. She thought of her parents, of the truckers who'd trusted her, of the prayer card in her pocket. This wasn't just about winning a debate, it was about showing who she was. She leaned forward, her voice low but piercing, every word deliberate. "You're done, Mr. De Niro." The line landed like a thunderclap. The audience erupted, cheers and gasps blending into a wall of sound. Laura's eyes widened, her pen frozen mid-note. De Niro's face flushed deeper, his mouth opening, then closing. No words coming. He adjusted his chair, his movements jerky, as if trying to reclaim his space. The camera zoomed in, catching the shock in his eyes, the way his hands shook slightly. Jenny, watching from the sidelines, typed furiously on her phone. Posting Karoline just ended De Niro. Leavitt beats De Niro. The post spread like wildfire, retweets climbing by the second. The audience was on its feet now, some chanting Karoline's name, others still loyal to De Niro but visibly shaken. Laura raised a hand, her voice cutting through. "We're heading to a break, but don't go anywhere." The lights dimmed, but the energy didn't fade. Karoline leaned back, her face calm but her heart racing. She'd crossed a line, and there was no turning back. De Niro stared at her, his eyes narrow, his silence louder than his earlier attacks. Her phone buzzed, but she didn't check it. She knew X was ablaze, and Jack Harlan's message loomed large. The stage felt alive, the balance fully tipped. Karoline's bold stare held De Niro's, unwavering, as the crowd's roar echoed in her ears. The Fox News studio buzzed with raw energy as Karoline Leavitt's words, "You're done, Mr. De Niro," echoed through the room. The audience was on its feet, a wave of cheers and gasps crashing over the stage. Robert De Niro's face was a mask of red, his hands fumbling with his tie as he muttered, "This is biased media nonsense. He pushed back his chair, the scrape loud in the charged silence, and stormed off stage, leaving the seat empty. The camera lingered on the vacant spot, a stark symbol of his retreat. Laura Ingram stood, her usual composure giving way to open admiration. "That was something," she said, her voice carrying over the crowd's roar. "Karoline, your poise tonight remarkable." Half the audience rose in a standing ovation, clapping wildly, while others sat, arms crossed, still loyal to De Niro but visibly shaken. A woman in a red sweater wiped her eyes, nodding, while a man nearby shook his head, muttering about staged drama. Karoline sat steady, her gold cross necklace catching the light, her face calm but her pulse racing. Backstage, as the applause continued, Jenny, the stagehand who'd nodded to Karoline in the first hour, approached her in a quiet corner. Her clipboard was tucked under her arm, her eyes bright. "I posted your clip," she said, her voice low but excited. "The one with De Niro's Obama interview. It's everywhere now." Karoline blinked. "Processing. You did that?" she asked, her voice soft. Jenny nodded, pulling out her phone to show the X post, now with tens of thousands of retweets. The hashtag #LeavittBeatsDeNiro trended at #1, alongside memes like Gen Z 1, Boomer 0. Karoline's lips curved slightly, a rare smile. "Thank you," she said, her hand brushing Jenny's arm. The studio screen flashed, cutting through the moment. A tweet from Donald Trump appeared, bold and unmistakable, very proud of Karoline. She showed them all the truth. The audience erupted again, some chanting. Karoline Laura read the tweet aloud, her smile widening. "That's high praise," she said, glancing at Karoline, who nodded but didn't speak. She thought of her parents watching at the diner, her mom's text, her grandmother's prayer card. This wasn't just her fight, it was theirs, too. De Niro's team, scrambling for damage control, leaked a statement to CNN, claiming he'd been ambushed by a partisan setup, but the words fell flat. Karoline's clips, her video play, her stat sheet, her final line were being shared millions of times on X, drowning out his defense. A producer named Tom, the one who'd warned Karoline to stay civil, watched the monitors, his glasses reflecting the chaos. He muttered to a colleague, "We didn't see this coming." A brief memory flickered in Karoline's mind hours before the show. Kneeling in her hotel room, praying for strength. Her faith had carried her through the diner days, through Washington's grind, and now through this fire. She touched her necklace, grounding herself. The audience wasn't just seeing a debater anymore. They saw a woman who'd stood up to a giant and won, a man in the back row who'd scoffed earlier, now clapped slowly, his face thoughtful. Laura kept the momentum going, her voice sharp. "Karoline, you've made your case tonight. What's next for you?" Karoline leaned into the microphone, her voice even. "I'll keep showing up," she said, "for the people who sent me here." The crowd cheered again, louder now, the sound swelling. Jenny, still backstage, typed another post. "Karoline Leavitt isn't just a press secretary. She's us." The post spread, picking up thousands of likes in minutes. The studio lights dimmed slightly as Laura wrapped the segment. "This is one for the history books," she said, her eyes on Karoline. The audience was still buzzing, some pulling out phones to share clips, others debating in hushed tones. Karoline stood, shaking hands with a few crew members, her movements humble but deliberate. She caught De Niro's empty chair in her peripheral vision, a quiet testament to the shift she'd sparked. As she stepped backstage, Tom approached Laura, his voice low but urgent. "She's changed the game," he said, nodding toward Karoline's retreating figure. Laura glanced at her, then back at the monitors, where X was ablaze with Karoline's name. The producer's words carried weight, a nod to something bigger than the night's debate. Karoline's phone buzzed, likely Jack Harlan or her team, but she didn't check it. She walked toward the exit, her heels clicking softly, her mind already on what came next. The crowd's cheers followed her, a sound that promised her fight was far from over. Karoline Leavitt stepped out of the Fox News studio into the crisp New York night, the city's hum a sharp contrast to the charged chaos she'd left behind. Her phone glowed with notifications, ex-posts, texts, missed calls, but she silenced it, her fingers moving to type a single message to her mom. For you and Dad. The words were simple, but they carried the weight of her fight, her roots, her victory. She slipped the phone into her blazer, her gold cross necklace catching the faint glow of a streetlight as she walked. The studio's glass doors closed behind her, but a nearby broadcast screen replayed the night's climax: De Niro's empty chair, a stark image of his retreat. Karoline didn't look back. Her mind drifted to her parents' diner in New Hampshire, where she'd first tucked her grandmother's prayer card into her apron at 16. She could still smell the coffee, hear the clink of plates, see the truckers who'd shared their stories. That girl hadn't dreamed of TV studios or viral moments. She just wanted to make her family proud. She walked a few blocks, the city's noise fading as she entered a small coffee shop, its windows fogged from the evening chill. The barista, a young woman with tired eyes and a name tag reading Sarah, took her order a black coffee. No sugar. Karoline watched her move, her hands quick but weary, and saw a piece of herself in the way Sarah forced a smile. When the coffee came, Karoline slid a $20 bill across the counter. Far more than the cost. Keep it, she said softly. Sarah's eyes widened, her smile genuine now, a mirror of Karoline's own past at the diner. Thank you, Sarah said, her voice catching. Karoline nodded. No need for more words. She took her coffee to a corner table, the shop's warmth a quiet refuge. Her phone buzzed again, and this time she glanced at it. X was still ablaze with Leavitt beats De Niro. But one post stood out, a video from a young conservative activist named Emily, barely 20, with a modest following. Karoline Leavitt showed us how to stand up, Emily said, her voice fierce. I'm carrying her fight truth over flash. The video had thousands of views, comments flooding in. She's our voice. Gen Z's got guts. Karoline's lips pressed together, a faint pride stirring. She hadn't set out to inspire, but the ripple was real. The coffee shop's TV played a muted replay of the show, Laura Ingram's face filling the screen. Karoline caught snippets of the closing. Karoline Leavitt didn't just debate tonight. She showed conviction. The camera had panned to her necklace during the broadcast, its glint tying back to her faith, her steadfastness. Karoline touched it now, her fingers tracing the familiar shape. She thought of her prayer before the show, asking for strength, not glory. The answer had come, not in a spotlight, but in moments like Sarah's smile, Emily's video, outside. A few passers-by glanced at her, some recognizing her from the show. A man in a coat paused, then nodded respectfully before moving on. Karoline sipped her coffee, its bitterness grounding her. She didn't need the applause or the hashtags. She'd done what she came to do: stand up, speak truth, honor her roots. But the night wasn't just hers. Jenny, the stagehand who'd posted the viral clip, had turned a spark into a fire. Jack Harlan's message, "You're not done yet," hinted at doors opening, and Emily's vow showed a generation watching. Karoline finished her coffee and stood, leaving the cup on the table. She stepped back into the night, her heels clicking on the sidewalk. The broadcast screen down the street now showed Laura's final words, a voiceover that carried even in the city's din. Some heroes don't shout, they just show up. The words lingered as Karoline walked, her figure blending into the crowd. She wasn't chasing the spotlight. She was already thinking of the next fight, the next truth. The camera lingered on the empty coffee shop table, Sarah pocketing the tip with a smile, a small act echoing Karoline's own. As she turned a corner, her phone buzzed one last time. She didn't check it, but the question hung in the air, unspoken but heavy. Who else would rise from the shadows, inspired by a woman who'd faced a giant and walked away unchanged? The city moved on, but Karoline's quiet legacy was just beginning. A spark that would light fires she'd never see. A small cross necklace caught the light, and a quiet woman changed the room. Sometimes, the loudest truths don't need a shout. They just need someone to stand firm. Who else carries a fight no one sees? If this story stirred something in you, a memory, a question, or a pause, subscribe to Crossfire Justice for more stories that echo long after they end. Thank you for watching.